striding into Downing Street on the final day of a week-long diplomatic tour. An outstretched hand ignored, a bear-hug embrace offered instead. This was a show of solidarity and symbolism. For an hour, Sir Keir Starmer and Volodymyr Zelenskyy discussed tomorrow's Ukrainian peace summit. A readout from Number 10 said the leaders agreed the upcoming talks, quote, present a viable chance to make progress as long as Putin takes action to prove he is serious about peace. But this is a peace summit, of course, to which neither of these men were invited. Donald Trump is the negotiator-in-chief meeting Vladimir Putin tomorrow, the man Ukraine and the EU have desperately been trying to influence. Today, he told Fox News Radio his expectations of an outcome.
It's like a chess game. This meeting sets up the second meeting. But there is a 25% chance that this meeting will not be a successful meeting, in which case I will run the country and we have made America great again.
For Russia, today was a day for flattery.
The current American administration is making, in my opinion, quite energetic and sincere efforts to stop the hostilities, stop the crisis, and reach agreements that are of interest to all parties involved in this conflict in order to create long-term conditions for peace between our countries.
The scope of the negotiations, though, according to Russia, appear to have widened beyond Ukraine's borders.
One of Vladimir Putin's presidential aides has come out this morning and said he believed there was, quote, enormous untapped potential for trade and economic cooperation between the US and Russia. Is there a fear that these talks end up becoming about the US and Russia as opposed to Ukraine and Russia?
I mean, perhaps. But again, what the president wants, what he values above everything, is trying to find peace in Ukraine. You know, he's a deal maker. If he thinks that there is an economic deal that he can get that would be a part of some kind of a final peace deal, that's fine. But the president has said repeatedly his number one priority is to get the war to stop permanently in Ukraine. And I think that will be his primary focus.
But on the best terms for Ukraine, or on the best terms for possibly the United States?
Trying to determine what's going to be in a final deal right now is just incredibly premature.
But while peace is about to be discussed in Alaska, war still rages in Ukraine. Russia still continues to advance. And yesterday, President Trump was reminded of how talks with Putin have evolved in the past.
Do you believe you can convince him to stop targeting civilians in Ukraine?
Well, I'll tell you what, I've had that conversation with him. I've had a lot of good conversations with him. Then I go home and I see that a rocket hit a nursing home or a rocket hit an apartment building and people are laying dead in the street. So I guess the answer to that is no, because I've had this conversation.
How much of an impact will those frustrations, those embarrassments play in these negotiations?
And when it comes to Vladimir Putin, you know, he does not negotiate in good faith. He is not a good guy. And I think the president has really come to terms with that. He understands that now. And I think that definitely will be, you know, in the back of his mind. And if Putin comes in and jerks him around again, I don't think he's going to be happy with what he gets from President Trump.
Has today's visit been a success, Prime Minister?
That very public show of cooperation on display again as President Zelenskyy left Downing Street, Keir Starmer breaking protocol to walk him to his car. Only tomorrow might we find out if the leader of the United States continues to stand shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine too. There is a notable disconnect between the importance being placed on tomorrow's talks here versus in Europe. As if to underline that point, right now, Donald Trump is talking in the Oval Office. He's taking questions. For the first half hour, he was talking about social security, not a mention of Ukraine. Now, talk to people involved in negotiations in Europe and in Downing Street, and they say they are as confident as they can be that they have presented Donald Trump with a united front with Ukraine and that he is with them, because the nightmare situation for Ukraine is that tomorrow, one-on-one in that room, Vladimir Putin can look very reasonable, look eye to eye with Donald Trump and say, it's not us, it's Ukraine, it's President Zelenskyy who is the blocker to peace. And in that room, Donald Trump, who not so long ago had a very public falling out with President Zelenskyy in the Oval Office, just might believe him.
Paul in Washington, thanks very much. Well, Ambassador John Bolton was President Trump's third national security advisor in the first administration and served in the role when Trump met Putin in Helsinki in 2018. He's fallen out with the president since then, who this week called Mr. Bolton a fired loser, really dumb, and said it was very unfair that the US media outlets were quoting Mr. Bolton. So what does he have to say? I spoke to him earlier.
Well, I think Vladimir Putin, in a sense, has already gained a success simply by having the meeting, breaking free of the purdah he was in diplomatically ever since the invasion of Ukraine. And he has a chance one-on-one with Trump to try and get back the personal relationship, the friendship that Trump thought he had with Putin and on which he was relying to get a ceasefire in the Ukraine conflict soon after he took office. That obviously hasn't happened. He said some harsh words about Putin. And I think what Putin now wants to do is use his KGB training to reel Trump back in and get him back on his side.
Trump obviously prides himself on being a deal maker, but is there a deal to be done here that satisfies all parties?
I don't see it at this point. I think the most that Trump can hope for is some aspect that he can declare victory on and move the process along. He's spoken of the next meeting being a three-way meeting with Zelenskyy, Putin, and himself. That was something he said during our campaign last fall, that he'd get the two of them together in a room and solve the problem in 24 hours. That hasn't happened, but his desire for a Nobel Peace Prize is a highly motivating factor. It was reported this morning in the Norwegian press that he actually called Jens Stoltenberg, former Secretary General of NATO, now Norwegian finance minister, and asked him for the Nobel Peace Prize, and in preparation for a call to the Prime Minister of Norway, apparently to do the same thing. So he's on the case.
And if the prize is what it takes to bring about some kind of ceasefire or even peace in Ukraine, is that okay? Is that all right with you?
Well, I don't think the parties are close enough that anything other than a temporary ceasefire would be possible. I mean, I think, and I've believed for some time, it's Putin that ought to want the ceasefire because he needs time to refurbish and rebuild the Russian military. That ceasefire line could turn into a new Ukraine-Russian border, which would give Putin control of everything that they hold now. That would be quite a victory. That would be a big setback for Ukraine.
Trump is famously obsessed with real estate and also with territory and possible swaps of territory. And that's something that a lot of European leaders talk about as well. But for Putin, this is something different, isn't it? This is about legacy. And how do you crack that particular nut? How do you solve that riddle?
Well, you know, I think it's an important point for European leaders and American leaders who talk about land swaps. This is a people swap, too. I mean, you're consigning potentially some people to live under an authoritarian government in Russia, or else you're forcing them to pick up stakes, leave their homes and businesses. You could have a massive refugee flow out of the Donbass region, for example, into the rest of Ukraine. But from Putin's point of view, it's neither the specific pieces of land nor the people. It's the Russian Empire. He said back in 2005 that the breakup of the Soviet Union was the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the 20th century. And he said in other speeches since then, effectively, he wants the Russian Empire back, and he can't have the Russian Empire unless he gets Ukraine. So he's not going away.
President Trump's been pretty rude about you in the past. He's called you dumb. He's called you a loser. What advice would you give him today?
Well, I'd probably give him the opposite of what I thought he should do, and so he'd react against it and actually do the right thing. But what he should be doing is telling Putin that if they don't get serious about withdrawing Russian forces from Ukraine, that he will significantly increase U.S. assistance, and that the objective will be to restore Ukraine to its full sovereignty and territorial integrity, which as of now is still the stated objective of every NATO member.
Finally, and very briefly, on a scale of 1 to 10, how hopeful are you that tomorrow's summit might lead to something better for Ukraine and for Europe?
I'm probably about a 2 or 3.
That's not very high, is it?
Well, I think that's realistic. If it's better than that, I'll be delighted, but I'm not going to lose any sleep over it tonight.
Ambassador John Bolton, thanks very much.
Thanks for having me.
Well, with President Trump's talk of territory swaps, here's a reminder of the land at stake, the state of the front lines and how they've moved over more than a decade of war. Back in 2014, Russian troops invaded Ukraine, seizing then annexing Crimea. And in Luhansk and Donetsk in the east, Russian-backed militants seized large areas too. 8 years later, in 2022, Russia launched a full-scale invasion. Its troops seized large parts of Zaporizhia and Kherson, which remain divided by the front line to this day. Russia wants to claim the whole of Luhansk and Donetsk, but is reportedly offering to freeze the front lines in Zaporizhia and Kherson, allowing it to maintain a land bridge to Crimea. But it's not yet clear what President Trump's talk of land swaps will actually mean. And Ukraine has already said that any ceding of territory is against its constitution. Well, joining me here in Kyiv is Vadim Pristaiko, a career diplomat who was most recently Ukraine's ambassador to the UK and previously served as foreign minister. He was in the room with the Russians during the Minsk negotiations in 2014, which aimed to stop the fighting in eastern Ukraine. Vadim Pristaiko, Trump said no deal without Zelenskyy. Do you believe him?
Oh, I like it. I like the way he said, and that's what Ukrainians hope, because we don't like this whole discussion about territorial successions. This is not a way to the peace, because we've been through it before.
But having been involved in the Minsk negotiations, which you said afterwards was sort of painful and humiliating, what are the kind of compromises, the kind of concessions that you think Ukraine might have to make to get a deal to end the war here?
At that time it was different because Russians never claimed that this part belonged to them. They were talking about defending some rights of Russian-speaking people. They were respecting some sort of separatist movement in the particular regions, but they never claimed that this is their territory, never put it in the constitution. So we could talk about any special status, respect to the minority languages, minority rights. It never been the conversation about us giving anything to land, some lands or anything else.
But Russian occupation, even if the boundaries, the borders don't change, that's out of the question, that's a red line?
It's not about constitution only, and I believe people are making a huge mistake, because first of all, in the conversation, what I read is like we're swapping Ukrainian lands for more Ukrainian lands. There is nothing of Russian is occupied, nothing at stake, nothing is threatened by Ukraine. So this is first. Second, what we believe, the Russians took Crimea and never stopped coming again. They took parts of east of Ukraine, didn't stop either. So why would we believe that this time, when they have something, they will be satisfied and will not get even deeper in Ukrainian territory?
And whatever is agreed in the coming days, you know that Russia will be back for more.
Sure. And what Zelenskyy is saying, that he doesn't even have the right because of the constitution, I would dig even deeper. It's not about constitution, no, because this is legal how we describe why we can do some things. This is important to understand that Ukrainians don't want to give anything to Russians. We've been through centuries and centuries of competition and wars. We understand that they are not stopping just because they're having more of what they want.
But if Minsk was humiliating, I mean, this threatens to be even worse, doesn't it? The foundations that are laid in Alaska.
This is totally different. The humiliation is not at stake anymore. This is survival of our state. And this is existence of us. Because if they have this land and we are on a lesser sort of defendable positions as our military describing, they will go again. And this time, because we are not member of NATO as your nation or anybody else, we are on our own.
But you are prepared to acknowledge that there will have to be some kind of compromises and concessions from Ukraine?
The question is, what is that? If we are to, to have the control of the territories, I don't know, Hong Kong style or something, this can be discussed, especially about Crimea. But just to give them what they want, hoping that this particular crocodile will be fed and give it, no, we just don't believe it happening.
And in return, if Ukraine does make concessions, what kind of security guarantees, what does that look like for
NATO
Ukraine?
membership.
Yeah, but that's not going to happen, is it?
I don't know. Maybe you will vote for this. Maybe President Trump will tell that whatever we are doing, we as a member of NATO have to do something. Otherwise...
You're dreaming, aren't you?
Yeah, I've been ambassador to NATO. I understand it's not perfect, but that's the best in this part of the globe. Otherwise, who will give the guarantees that they won't come again and again and again?
I mean, just hearing you talk, it seems inconceivable that there's going to be any kind of breakthrough soon. And yet, here in Kyiv, you can hear the music playing in the background. There's a concert going on around the corner. People are sort of carrying on. They're desperate to get back to normal life.
Agree.
People are, the public, the polls suggest, are, by a large majority, they want the war to end, don't they?
Everybody wants war to end. The question is, through our history, how this war ends. We've been losing our statehood for so many times. We just don't want to. This is the best attempt we had over the centuries and centuries. We cherish it.
And quite apart from public opinion, I mean, you're struggling to get the conscripts, aren't you? Get the troops that you need.
Obviously, nobody wants to die. We are a democratic nation. It's very difficult to turn your people into war mode and send them to die even for their own nation. People want to leave. But what we are trying to do, we're trying to be more effective. 3 times more effective with our drones, with everything we're producing and being held by a nation like yours. We can be much more effective to stop them. We are not going to invade Moscow. There are people who would believe that that's the right way to do, but we are not. We just want to stop them at where they were. And believe me, there is a ways to do it.
Vadim Prystaiko, thank you very much for joining us. Now back to you, Matt, in Alaska.
Thanks, Kathy, in Kyiv. Now, the state of Alaska voted overwhelmingly for Donald Trump in 3 elections, but not everyone here is happy about the arrival of Vladimir Putin. A demonstration is even planned for this afternoon in a place where politics rarely spills onto the streets. Some even see the summit as a rogues' reunion between a president indicted for war crimes and a president convicted of a felony in a New York courtroom. But whatever your politics are, the stage is set. And let's face it, it's pretty magnificent. They call this place the last frontier. With its glaciers, lakes and rivers, Alaska may also be the last place you expect a summit on ending a war in Europe. The only way to appreciate the size of America's largest state is to travel by seaplane. Although the local pilots are put out by the fact that for 7 hours on Friday, in the summer tourist season, all airspace over Anchorage will be closed because of 2 planes landing here at Elmendorf-Richardson Air Force Base. One of them belonging to the Russian president, the other Air Force One. There are few places more remote than Anchorage, Alaska, and it is a strange kind of place to discuss geopolitics, especially war and peace in Europe, thousands of miles from here. But you never know, Trump and Putin might just start to make history in this place. The right kind of history, everyone hopes. The gates to the Air Force Base are guarded by a Phantom F-4 fighter, a relic from the Cold War when this place was on permanent guard against the Soviet Union, just across the straits. If history is about to unfold here, the mood is pretty inscrutable, and that's not just the moose grazing at the perimeter fence. Hi there. At Ski and Benny's Pizzeria, the owner, Mustafa, is philosophical.
Everybody needs it.
Yeah.
The peace.
The peace.
And it's very necessary for everyone. So I think everybody is hungry for the peace.
Yeah.
Peace.
And who do you think will have the upper hand in the negotiations? Who's going to be stronger, Putin or Trump?
Oh, that's a hard question.
His daughter, Honey, is somewhat unfazed by it all.
I mean, it's good for us, I think. I mean, a little coverage, a little excitement, something to look forward to. Yeah.
The bar is low.
Yeah, the bar is very low.
Next door at the Grizzly Cuts barber, hello, Naomi can barely contain her excitement.
Yeah, I love to. I want to talk to him.
You want to talk to whom? Putin or Trump?
Trump.
You like Trump?
I love him.
You love him. Do you think he's going to make peace here in Ukraine?
Yes.
Not everyone is as convinced as her, especially the people at the sharp end in Ukraine, a million miles from these puddles. The 2 leaders have some troubling summit history. In Hamburg, they huddled alone just with their translators. Trump later confiscated the notes. In Helsinki, who can forget Helsinki? Trump seemed to parrot Putin's denial of interference in the US election.
I have President Putin. He just said it's not Russia. I will say this, I don't see any reason why it would be.
Then his own advisors were baffled. But would cabinet jaws drop today? And then there's Alaska's unique history, which may be giving Trump the wrong idea. St. Innocent, the Russian Orthodox cathedral on Turpin Street, a reminder of Alaska's strange real estate past. The state was sold by Russia to America in 1867 for a mere $7 million. A miracle of a deal that Trump might have claimed was his if it hadn't happened a century and a half ago.
They're only 55 miles apart, mainland to mainland,
and so forth.
Here's David Ramsor, supreme political fixer turned historian.
There's a real natural affinity between Alaskans and Russians generally. We're both northern peoples. We share a similar climate, a similar geography, and a similar distance from our capitals, which we're happy to be a long way from. But I think in the case of Putin here, the invasion was just detested by most Alaskans and most Americans.
The invasion of Ukraine.
Right, and we do not think that Putin should be allowed to stand on U.S. soil until he pulls out of the Ukraine.
Traffic jams with seaplanes at rush hour, a typical Anchorage problem. But tomorrow this magnificent backdrop could become the stage for history. Well, I'm joined now by the 11th governor of Alaska, Bill Walker, who travelled with President Trump to meet the Chinese leader Xi Jinping in 2017. And from Germany by Roderich Kiesewetter, retired colonel and one of the most experienced foreign and security policy experts in the ruling centre-right CDU party of the Chancellor, Friedrich Merz. Welcome to both of you. If I can start with you, Governor, thanks for coming on the programme. You've seen Trump in action, on geopolitics and diplomacy. Is he up to it tomorrow?
Well, I think he is. I mean, I think we'll see what we see. I mean, I think it's hard to foretell what's going to happen.
That's always the case, isn't it?
It's always the case. It is, and certainly I don't have any experience, obviously, with Putin, and so we're all obviously. I think we're all hopeful there'll be some resolution to the for the war in Ukraine. And
can Trump be relied upon to remember the talking points that were hammered into him in various meetings with Zelenskyy and the Europeans just in the last few days?
I think he'll do what he's going to do. And I think that I don't know him that well. I did spend time with him when I was governor. I traveled with him, obviously, to China. He brought President Xi to Alaska. But, I think he's going to do what he's going to do. And I think that it may not be as scripted as the White House would like. I'll put it that way.
Or Trump would like. But this place is perfect in a sense, isn't it? I mean, it's weird because it's so far away from Europe, but this is for a Russian-American encounter. This is the place, isn't it?
It is. I mean, it just shows our location is strategic. We're only 2 miles from Russia, between Little Diomede and Big Diomede. So
2 miles.
2 miles distance. So, we have a lot in common, obviously, in the purchase that took place, etc. And so, this makes a lot of sense to me here.
And does the purchase from 1867 would that put Trump in the mood for another territory swap, maybe in Ukraine?
Well, I don't know. We'll know that when it comes out, I guess. But our relationship with Russia has been strained, certainly on fisheries issues and whatnot. So we're hoping that this will be maybe resolved a number of issues.
Stay there, Governor. I want to bring in our German guest, Mr. Kiesewetter. Thanks very much for coming on the programme as well. I mean, the Europeans feel very much on the sidelines. They're not at the table, but they might be on the menu, as it were. Do you think that Europe has done enough to make itself relevant to this summit?
Thank you for this excellent question, Matt Fry, and hello, Mr. Governor. Well, we pay now the price for our complacency since 2014, where especially Germany tried to appease Putin, and the last 3 years where Europe was split in the Tallinn Initiative, especially fostered and supported by UK and Estonia, but France and Germany were too reluctant in the last years, and now we are have waked up, but we see that the train has passed us. So it will be a Black Friday for Ukraine and for Europe tomorrow. So what we hope is that Ukraine will not accept an armistice, but that we all are fighting for peace, freedom, and self-determination for Ukraine and Europe. But still, we are on the menu.
If it does turn out to be a Black Friday, to what extent does Europe need to blame itself? Because Europe has been talking about weaning itself off America ever since, J.D. Vance read at the Riot Act in the Munich conference in February. Trump has been calling on the Europeans to do more and more for themselves and for Ukraine, but they haven't.
I met Elbridge Colby. I listened in Munich to Vance, and I really see that America is not on the side of the rule-based order as we were used to, but it is a type of modern oligarchy which is looking for its own advantage, and it is also a sacrifice of being flattered by Putin. And we Europeans are not strong enough. Economically, we are very strong, but we are a sacrifice of the cognitive warfare of Putin, who is knowing how to achieve that the societies become peace-loving and appeasing Putin, whereas we feel and see the Russian drones flying over German critical infrastructure. We have targeted killing also in the Baltic states. We have sabotage in Germany, in Poland, but there is no willingness to contain Russia. We could do this in taking over air defense over Western Ukraine. We could do this in sending high-precision, long-distance weapons, but we always have waited for the United States, and this was in vain because this is a war on the European soil. It's our responsibility, and we have to give the Americans the necessary leeway to be present and help the sea lines of communications in the Indo-Pacific. This would be fair burden sharing, but we are too black-eyed and too full of complacency, I would like to say.
Let me ask you the same question, Governor. The Europeans too full of complacency and still too reliant on the United States. You know, as the former governor of this state, which couldn't be further removed from Europe, is it time for the Europeans to, sort out their own mess?
Well, I think so. I think this is a world issue, and I think everybody needs to come to the table on this. I'm sorry that President Zelenskyy is not going to be in Alaska for this meeting.
Do you think he should be?
I think he should be. I think if you're going to settle something between two parties, my past profession as an attorney, you've got to have, all parties at the table. And so I think there's a role certainly for the European countries as well. But I think that, they build this, the White House, as a listening session. Maybe there's two President Trumps, because I never known him to be a tremendous listener. He is a doer. He takes control of things, and I'd be surprised if this was just a listening session on President Trump's part.
Do you think all this summit, this setting, everything that we've been talking about could be a complete waste of time?
I hope not. And there's also a theory that a deal's been made already. They're just going to announce it here. That's a low probability, perhaps, but I guess I'm the eternal optimist that maybe they have reached some sort of a deal that's acceptable, and they'll announce it here in Alaska on Friday.
Roderich Kiesewetter, if I can turn to you again. Are you afraid that the whole security future of Europe, without Europe at the table, will be redrawn, or the beginnings of it could be redrawn at this summit tomorrow?
Yes, I believe so. Look, Putin has had a lot of ultimatums and some sanctions, but never an ultimatum ended with consequences. Never. And he had already achieved that Putin is really conceding that Ukraine must not become a NATO member, that Ukraine has to hand over territory, and also Crimea, which is very important for Turkey, for the Black Sea, for the security of NATO. So Europe has the hope that we can take Ukraine into NATO and the European Union, but therefore we need security guarantees for Ukraine. So the main key must be, if they have to hand over territory, it must be de facto, not de jure. It must be handed over. It should not be handed over because Ukraine will not accept it. And we in Europe will receive millions of refugees from Ukraine, not only from the Donbass, but people will not trust in Ukraine. And Putin has already announced that also Moldova, as a former Soviet republic, and the three Baltic states as former Soviet republics, but independent empires some 200 years ago, will also be part of his new empire. And therefore, the whole European Union is at stake, and NATO as well. And therefore, it's also our plea to the United States not to give up the transatlantic cooperation. But we Europeans have to take over more burden. That's true.